Shake the bottle first, then pour it into the spoon, and make sure it's
a whole spoonful. Are you going to gulp it all down in one go? George asked her. Or will you sip it? What I do is none of your business, the old woman said. Fill the spoon. As George removed the lid and began very slowly to pour the thick brown stuff into the spoon, he couldn't help thinking back upon all the mad and marvellous things that had gone into the making of this crazy stuff. The shaving soap, the hair remover, the dandruff cure, the automatic washing machine powder, the flea powder for dogs, the shoe polish, the black pepper, the horseradish sauce, and all the rest of them. Not to mention the powerful animal pills and powders and liquids, and the brown paint. Open your mouth wide, Grandma, he said, and I'll pop it in. The old hag opened her small wrinkled mouth, showing disgusting pale brown teeth. Here we go, George cried out. Swallow it down. Woof! And he pushed the spoon well into her mouth and tipped the mixture down her throat. Then he stepped back to watch the result. It was worth watching. Grandma yelled, "Ow! Ow!" And her whole body shot whoosh up into the air. It was exactly as though someone had pushed an electric wire through the underneath of her chair and switched on the current. Up she went, like a jack-in-the-box. And she didn't come down. She stayed there, suspended in mid-air, about 2 feet up, still in a sitting position, but rigid now, frozen, quivering, the eyeballs bulging, the hair standing straight up on end. Is something wrong, Grandma? George asked her politely. Are you all right? Suspended up there in space, the old girl was beyond speaking. The shock that George's marvellous mixture had given her must have been tremendous. You'd have thought she'd swallowed a red-hot poker the way she took off from that chair. Then she came down again with a plop, back into her seat. "Ah! Call the fire brigade!" she shouted suddenly. "My stomach's on fire!" "It's just the medicine, Grandma," George said. "It's good, strong stuff." "Ah, fire!" the old woman yelled. "Fire in the basement! Get a bucket! Man the hoses! Do something, quick!" "Cool it, Grandma," George said. But he got a bit of a shock when he saw the smoke coming out of her mouth and out of her nostrils. Clouds of black smoke were coming out of her nose and blowing round the room. "By golly, you really are on fire," George said. "Of course I'm on fire," she yelled. "I'll be burned to a crisp. I'll be fried to a frazzle. I'll be boiled like a beetroot." George ran into the kitchen and came back with a jug of water. "Open your mouth, Grandma," he cried. He could hardly see her for the smoke, but he managed to pour half a jugful down her throat. And a sizzling sound, the kind you get if you hold a hot frying pan underneath a cold tap, came up from deep down inside Grandma's stomach. And the old hag bucked and shied and snorted. And spouts of water came shooting out of her nose. And the smoke cleared away. "The fire's out," George announced proudly. "You'll be all right now, Grandma." "All right," she yelled. "Who's all right? Oh, there's squigglers in my belly. There's bangers in my bottom." She began bouncing up and down on the chair. Quite obviously, she was not very comfortable. "You'll find it's doing you a lot of good, that medicine, Grandma," George said. "Good?" she screamed. "Doing me good? It's killing me!" And then a funny thing happened. Grandma's body gave a sudden sharp twist and a sudden sharp jerk, and she flipped herself out of the chair, landed neatly on her 2 feet on the carpet. "That's terrific, Grandma," George cried. "You haven't stood up like that for years. Look at you. You're standing up all on your own, and you're not even using a stick." Grandma didn't even hear him. The frozen, pop-eyed look was back with her again now. She was miles away in another world. Marvellous medicine, George told himself. He found it fascinating to stand there and watch what it was doing to the old hag. What next, he wondered, and he soon found out. Suddenly, she began to grow. It was quite slow at first, just a very gradual inching upwards. Up, 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 about an inch every few seconds. And in the beginning, George didn't notice it. But when she had passed the 5'6" mark and was going on upwards towards being 6 foot tall, George gave a jump and shouted, "Hey, Grandma! You're growing! You're growing up! Hang on, Grandma! You better stop now or you'll be hitting the ceiling!" But Grandma didn't stop. It was a truly fantastic sight, this ancient, scrawny old woman getting taller and taller, longer and longer, thinner and thinner, as though she were a piece of elastic being pulled upwards by invisible hands. And when the top of her head actually touched the ceiling, George thought she was bound to stop. But she didn't. There was a sort of scrunching noise. And bits of plaster and cement came raining down. "Oh, hadn't you better stop now, Grandma?" George said. "Daddy's just had this whole room repainted." But there was no stopping her now. Soon her head and her shoulders had completely disappeared through the ceiling, and she was still going. George dashed upstairs to his own bedroom, and there she was, coming up through the floor, like a mushroom. "Whoa, P!" she shouted, finding her voice at last. "Hallelujah! Here I come!" "Steady on, Grandma," George said. "With a hey nonny no and up we go," she shouted. "Just watch me grow." "This is my room," George said. "Look at the mess you're making." "Terrific medicine," she cried. "Give me some more." "She's as dotty as a donut," George thought. "Come on, boy, give me some more," she yelled. "Dish it out, I'm slowing down." George was still clutching the medicine bottle in one hand and the spoon in the other. Well, he thought, why not? And he poured out a second dose and he plopped it into her mouth. "Pow-wee!" she screamed, and up she went again. Her feet were still on the floor downstairs in the living room, but her head was moving quickly towards the ceiling of the bedroom. "I'm on my way now, boy," she called down to George. "Just watch me go." "That's the attic above you, Grandma," George called out. "I keep out of there. It's full of bugs and bogles." Crash! The old girl's head went through the ceiling as though it were butter. George stood in his bedroom, gazing at the shambles. There was a big hole in the floor and another in the ceiling, and sticking up like a post between the two was the middle part of Grandma. Her legs were in the room below, her head in the attic. "I'm still going," came the old screechy voice from up above. "Give me another dose, my boy, and let's go through the roof." "No, Grandma, no," George called back. "You're busting up the whole house." "To heck with the house," she shouted. "I want some fresh air. I haven't been outside for 20 years. By golly, she is going through the roof, George told himself. He ran downstairs, he rushed out of the back door into the yard. It'd be simply awful, he thought, if she bashed up the roof as well. His father would be furious, and he, George, would get the blame. He'd made the medicine. He'd given her too much. "Don't come through the roof, Grandma," prayed George. "Please, don't." George stood in the farmyard, looking up at the roof. There was no sign of Grandma. Whew. The old Wurzels got stuck in the attic, George thought. Thank goodness for that. But then, very slowly, like some weird monster rising up from the deep, Grandma's head came through the roof. Then her scrawny neck and the tops of her shoulders. "How am I doing, boy?" she shouted. "How's about that for a bash-up?" "Don't you think you'd better stop now, Grandma?" George called out. "I have stopped," she answered. "I feel terrific. Didn't I tell you I had magic powers? Didn't I warn you I had wizardry in the tips of my fingers? But you wouldn't listen to your old Grandma." "You didn't do it, Grandma," George shouted back to her. "I did it. I made you a new medicine." "A new medicine? You? What rubbish!" she yelled. I did, George shouted. "You're lying as usual," Grandma yelled. "You're always lying." "I'm not lying, Grandma. I swear I'm not." The wrinkled old face high up on the roof stared down suspiciously at George. "Are you telling me you actually made a new medicine all by yourself?" she shouted. "Yes, Grandma, all by myself." "Well, I don't believe you," she answered. "But I'm very comfortable up here. Fetch me a cup of tea." Now, a brown hen was pecking about in the yard, close to where George was standing, and the hen gave him an idea. Quickly, he uncorked the medicine bottle and poured some of the brown stuff into the spoon. "Watch this, Grandma," he shouted. He crouched down, holding out the spoon to the hen. "Chicken," he said. Chicken. Come here, have some of this." Now, chickens are stupid birds and very greedy. They think everything is food. This one thought the spoon was full of corn. It hopped over and looked at the spoon. "Come on, chicken," George said. "Good chicken. Chick, 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 chick." And the brown hen stretched out its neck towards the spoon and went peck. It got a beakful of medicine. The effect was electric. "Ah, ah, ah!" shrieked the hen and shot straight up in the air like a rocket. It went as high as the house. Then down it came again into the yard, splosh. And there it sat with its feathers all sticking out straight from its body. There was a look of amazement on its stupid face. "You've done it in, you stupid boy," Grandma shouted. "That hen's gonna die. Your father'll be after you now. He'll give you a hiding and serve you right." But now, the hen began to grow. George had been waiting for this to happen. "It's growing," he yelled. "Grandma, look, it's growing." Bigger and bigger, taller and taller it grew. Soon, the hen was 4 or 5 times its normal size. "Can you see it, Grandma?" George shouted. "I can see it, boy," the old girl shouted back. "I'm watching it." George was hopping about from one foot to the other with excitement. "It's had the magic medicine, Grandma, and it's growing, just like you did." But there was a difference between the way the hen was growing and the way Grandma grew. When Grandma grew taller and taller, she got thinner and thinner. The hen didn't. It stayed nice and plump all along. Soon it was taller than George. But it didn't stop there. It went right on growing until it was about as big as a horse. And then it stopped. "Doesn't it look marvellous, Grandma?" George shouted. "Well, it's not as tall as me," Grandma sang out. "Compared with me, that hen is ditchy small. I am the tallest of them all."